let's do I was wrong about the new Pokemon type. What is the new, oh, Stellar Pokemon. Okay, it was just right there. It was right there.
A year ago, I made a video titled Why Pokemon's Newest Type is a Total Failure. And now, 1 year later, you're here watching a video calling the newest type a complete success. But here's the thing, Pokemon didn't release a new type in between these two videos. I'm actually talking about the exact same type, the Stellar type. Stellar has gone from a colorfully animated afterthought to a real presence in the competitive scene. In fact, I've been known to dabble in these most extravagant of hats myself. So what happened? Did Game Freak see my video, get mad about how right I was, and buff the Stellar Terra? Did they release a new DLC with better Stellar type Pokemon? Or maybe did they shower some love on the Pokemon who created the phenomenon? You know the one I'm talking about. In all three cases though, the answer is the same.
Terapagos, right?
Here's the thing, absolutely nothing changed about the Stellar type except for the way that people are using it. But to understand how they're using it, we have to talk about what it does first. So let's quickly review just what dipping into the Stellar stash does for your Pokemon. First of all, calling Stellar a type is a little bit of an exaggeration in and of itself, but don't blame me, Pokemon themselves announced it as the 19th type. The truth is though, Stellar is more of a modifier than anything else.
Man, actually, I wish we got the Stellar type in TCG. It would have been so cool to have like a little like rainbow-ish energy. I know rainbow energy and luminous energy exist, but come on, give us like another new basic energy type. Or better yet, bring back fairy types.
A way for Pokemon to naturally be Stellar type. And there aren't even any Stellar type moves, again under normal circumstances. Despite the size of the crown, you could actually argue that Stellar changes less about a Pokemon than normal terrestrialization. Normally, when a Pokemon terrestrializes, it loses its existing types and gets fully replaced by its Terra type. But while regular Terra types can lead to combos like an electric Cresselia levitating over any ground moves, or a fire type Gastrodon slurping up water moves with Storm Drain, the Stellar type changes the same amount of things about a Pokemon's defenses as the area of Paldea that it comes from, 0. A Pokemon who's terrestrialized to become the Stellar type shares the exact same weaknesses and resistances as its base form, outside of one notable exception. No points for guessing who, we'll get there. Instead, Stellar is a Terra type that you only use for offense. It's here where things start to get a little bit complicated. Let's take a look at regular terrestrialization first. Last time I did this video, I used Terrafire Hydreigon as an example, but we're in a different format now, so I need a new, stronger, candlestick-wearing dragon. How about Koraidon? No particular reason for choosing it, just off the top of my head. Now, when Koraidon terrestrializes to a Fire-type Pokemon, its Fire-type moves, such as Flare Blitz, get a 50% damage boost, the same amount of boost that a Pokemon normally gets from using a move that's the same as one of its types. We call this boost Stab, or same type attack bonus. If a Pokemon terrestrializes to a type that it already had that was already getting this Stab boost, so in Koraidon's case that would be Dragon or Fighting, that 50% boost instead becomes a 100% boost. Okay, but what happens with the Stellar Terra? Well, Stellar gives a boost to every type of move, but only once. So, in our example, a Stellar Koraidon would get a huge 100% damage boost on both of its stabs, but only once for a fighting move like Close Combat, and once for a dragon move like Dragon Claw, I guess, Scale Shot, Spike Blast? You can probably tell that Koraidon doesn't use the Stellar Terra very often. One of the reasons for that comes from how Stellar interacts with types that the Pokemon doesn't already possess. Instead of the normal 50% boost that you get from terrestrializing to a type, Terra Stellar grants a measly 20% damage boost if it's a type that you didn't already have. That's the same amount that you get for holding on to one of Arceus's unused outfits that it threw out, by the way. It's better than nothing, but the alternative isn't nothing. For most Pokemon, the defensive potential afforded by terrestrializing to a different type is way too much to pass up, and many attackers would often rather have the option to permanently boost one type of move rather than get a boost on every type of move, but only once per type. Earlier, I said that there were no Stellar type moves under normal circumstances, by which I mean there are no moves that start out as Stellar type, but there are some moves that can become Stellar. The only Stellar move that most Pokemon in the game can use is Stellar Terra Terra Blast. But so far, we've mostly talked about Stellar defensively. So what types does a Stellar type move hit for super effective damage, and which types resist it? Well, that question's a little bit more complicated than you might think.
I can
Stellar moves
imagine.
have no resistances, and they don't hit anything super effectively, except for opposing Pokemon who are terastallized. When a Pokemon terastallizes to the Stellar type, in addition to getting a
Yeah, I was
power
about to
boost from all of
say,
their moves and turning
It does
Tera
sound like a normal type where it's like neutral.
Blast to a Stellar type attack, Tera Blast also jumps from 80 to 100 base power, and gains the drawback of lowering your attacking stats by 1 stage after it hits something. Once again, not the most attractive option. Thankfully, if you were looking for an attractive option, we've got you covered there too, thanks to our sponsor, Holzkern. If you're looking to shine bright like a terastallized Pokemon with some stellar accessories, look no further. Holzkern's watches and jewelry boost the power of any outfit, no matter who you are. And unlike the Stellar Terra, it's not even limited to just the first time you wear them.
Will they attract the non-stinky TCG players to me? Because for some reason, I attract all the stinky TCG players. Hey, you! Yeah, you! Did you know that less than 30% of my viewers are subscribed to my YouTube channel? So, please do yourself a favor and click subscribe to get some more Poseidon content, whether you enjoy my reacts, gameplay videos, or more. Also, please be sure to click that bell button in order to be notified every single time I upload. Now, back to your regular scheduled programming.
Their unique, high-quality products are made from natural materials and are sure to make you sparkle in any setting. And they'll continue to shine with their 2-year guarantee. Those of you who watch the channel for a while know that Holzkern is one of our longest-running sponsors, and that's because I genuinely love their products. I've worn a Holzkern watch every single day for what feels like most of the past 2 years, maybe even longer at this point. Sense of time is all messed up. Don't know why. I even have a couple Holzkern watches that I only break out as like my fancy watches to wear for, you know, my fancier outfits. Their jewelry is awesome too. I was actually wearing it on stream in Toronto. This is a Holzkern piece, if you can even believe it. I've also used Holzkern products to make great gifts for my friends and family. And you too can dazzle like a Terra Stellar Diancie with your very own Holzkern products without having to pay the price of what must be a very expensive Diamond Storm. Use code WOLFIE for 15% off across the entire website with free express worldwide shipping that typically arrives within 2 to 5 business days. These speeds would even make Dragapult jealous. Once again, that's code WOLFIE for 15% off. Thanks again to Holzkern for sponsoring this video. And that's pretty much everything you need to know about Stellar for most Pokemon, but not for all of them. There is one Pokemon who truly becomes the Stellar type. It's time to talk about that very special Pokemon that I hinted at earlier. Ready to guess? Like I said, it's not very hard. That's right, it's Incineroar!
What?
Yeah, thought you knew what was up, huh? Goes to show you when you get too comfortable around here. Never let your guard down. Blatant misdirection aside, Terapagos is, of course, the only Pokemon who reacts differently to stellar terastallization. Aside from its form made exclusively to sell plushies and get you to watch the anime, Terapagos has 2 battle-relevant forms. When it enters the field, it automatically assumes the Terastal form, making it a normal type that has okay stats and an ability that makes all moves not very effective, but only while Terapagos is at full health. But when it terastallizes, and it can only terastallize to the Stellar type, it enters its, well, Stellar form, gaining massive amounts of bulk and power, activating its new ability, Terraform Zero, which removes all weather and terrain from the battlefield, and transforming its signature move, Terrastar Storm, from a normal move into a Stellar type move that has no drawback, high base power, no resistances, and hits both of your opponent's Pokemon. That just about sums up what the Stellar type does, in case you needed a reminder. So why exactly did I think that it was bad before? Well, to be fair to me, I never said that Terapagos was bad. And this is before the Pokemon was even tournament legal. What I said was, I thought it might be pretty good. In theory, it sounds extremely powerful. A contender in the Regulation G format, where restricted legendary Pokemon are allowed, maybe sometimes a tournament winner, but not the top turtle. And that's pretty much what happened. Terapagos has ridden the ebbs and flows of the format, but it's pretty much always been one of the top 5 or so restricted Pokemon. And despite never really rising to the top, it's performed well across a number of tournaments. Terra Stellar is a huge part of its game plan. Honestly, it's kind of its whole game plan, which makes sense for a Pokemon designed around the mechanic. Boost your stats, terastallize in the most dramatic fashion possible, launch the attack that's responsible for the whole Terra phenomenon in the first place, profit. However, that reliance on the mechanic is also Terapagos' biggest weakness. It is very predictable, and reliance on the mechanic is also Terapagos' biggest weakness. It is very predictable.
What is the context of that? Why did he get yeeted across the sky?
and it needs to terastallize in order to be useful. And it doesn't have the luxury of using terastallization to turn off its weaknesses like many of the other restricted legendary Pokemon. Scarlet and Violet aren't over yet, so there's a chance that somewhere down the line, Terapagos will become more popular, maybe in a rule set that allows more than one restricted legendary Pokemon. But for now, it's pretty widely agreed upon as about the 5th best restricted legendary Pokemon.
Fair enough.
Terapagos is a cool Pokemon, but what I really want to talk about in this video are the regular, degular, non-special turtles who use the stellar type well. Now, when I made that first video, it's not like absolutely no one was using the stellar Terra. It was just really, really close to absolutely nobody. Wait, what's going on? It almost looks like some of you are stellar. Oh, that must be my subscribers. Hey everybody. Oh, some of you are just regular.
What is that risk? The unfortunate thing is, I'm sure if somebody used that as like a pickup line towards me, it might have worked.
Too, huh? That's rough. Well, I guess there's nothing wrong with that, but if you want to become Stellar 2, all it takes is one click. And hey, Pokemon's making some pretty big moves over the next couple of years, so you'll probably want to be subscribed anyway, so you can keep abreast of them. Didn't mean to use the word abreast there, but I think it actually works, but it feels kind of weird. We already discussed the drawbacks of Stellar Terra a decent amount, but let's talk about the specific circumstances that meant a scant few Pokemon could actually use it well. In my original video, I listed 3 parameters to identify whether or not a Pokemon wants to use the Stellar Terra. First, no Pokemon that would want a defensive Terra will ever want to use Stellar Terra, since it doesn't change defensive relationships. Somewhat self-explanatory. Second, Pokemon who aren't going to be in the battle for a long time have more of a reason to use it. Terra Stellar's boosts are one time only. Even if you switch out and come back in, once you've used it, the boost for that type is gone. A Pokemon attacking for 3 or 4 turns in a row will normally see more value from a regular Terra type, even an offensive one. To make Stellar work, we want fast and frail heavy hitters. Finally, Pokemon who can take advantage of multiple types of strong moves, especially those with 2 types to take advantage of 2 stab boosts, are possible good candidates for the Stellar Terra. With these criteria identified, we could put out a perfect ad for the ideal Stellar candidate. Personal, new Terra type searching for its match. Stellar Stranger seeks a dual type, focus sash wielding attacker big on damage. Bulk not required. With all that in mind, I talked about 3 Pokemon who were sometimes using Stellar: Chenpao, Urshifu Dark, and Fluttermane. All of these Pokemon fit the criteria that we'd crafted perfectly, but it wasn't a match made in heaven. Even with all these Pokemon fitting the profile, Stellar Terra was by no means the go-to choice for any of these Pokemon, and I highlighted different options that I thought were often better. The damage boost provided by Terra simply wasn't worth the trade-off a lot of the time. It felt terrible to not use Terra Ghost on Chenpao, giving up your immunity to fighting moves and to Fake Out, or having to choose between only boosting one of Wicked Blow or Sucker Punch, or Moonblast and Dazzling Gleam. Stellar Terra was usable, but incredibly rare. And that brings us to today, where I've changed my tune completely. I said before that nothing changed with the Stellar type, so what did? Simple, the game around it and the people who play it. When the Stellar type was introduced, competitive Pokemon was still played in a format without powerful, restricted legendary Pokemon. We hadn't seen hide nor hair of a Terapagos, let alone a Miraidon or a Calyrex, but the Fluttermanes and Iron Hands of the world were still running amok. There was a bit of innovation with Stellar. We even saw some Urshifu run Terra Blast as a final move, with the idea being that you could still hit Pokemon who Terra'd to resist your moves, then ignore the stat drops because, in case you forgot, Urshifu is a cheater Pokemon who doesn't play by the rules. When the format changed to Regulation G, which allowed for a single restricted legendary Pokemon, Stellar Terra saw a bit more use right from the start. Part of that was Terapagos finally becoming legal, of course, but part of it was also people wanting to beat Terapagos as well. One Pokemon in particular stood out as prime Stellar material: Urshifu Rapid Strike. In the previous format, many Urshifu chose to run the Choice Scarf or Mystic Water items. This made Terra Water by far the most popular choice on Urshifu, because not only did it give its Water-type moves a damage boost, but it also turned off some of its weaknesses, most notably to Fairy-type attacks. But in the new format of Regulation G, due to the Pokemon being so much stronger, Focus Sash Urshifu became the dominant set. And Water Urshifu rose to prominence over its edgelord brethren because in addition to hitting Terapagos, it could easily tank Calyrex Ice's Glacial Lance, it could turn Kyogre's Rain against it, and it could tear through Incineroar without worrying about Intimidate. Now, Terra Water was also used offensively in the past because Surging Strikes is an incredible move, and because Urshifu is naturally so strong, it benefits from an offensive Terra. In past formats, Urshifu often got the chance to use Surging Strikes multiple times in the same battle because it could either knock opponents out before they could KO it, or it could force them to switch before attacking. And Terra Water did see some use in Regulation G as well, but by using Water Terra, Urshifu could not KO Terapagos in a single hit after it had gone big mode. And of course you could think about Terra Fighting, but Terra Fighting just offers so much less value than Terra Water because Surging Strikes is Urshifu's best move. This seems like a pretty tough position to be in, but there was another option. Terra Stellar, giving Urshifu the general value of boosting its water type moves most of the time, and helping it get the crucial KO against Terapagos with close combat at the same time. It was this kind of small optimization that led to the advancement of Stellar Terra across the board. Stellar Urshifu became more and more popular. I even ran it both at North American Internationals and at the World Championships last year, despite the fact that I originally was a Stellar hater. And that's where the innovation comes from on the player side of things. See, every generation of Pokemon, even every new format, demands that players keep improving. Personally, I think this is one of the coolest parts of playing Pokemon. The game stands still for nobody. And a big part of what I love about this game personally is that it makes me feel like I never stop growing while I'm playing too. It also means that even after months of playing the same format, players still find small, precise adjustments, and sometimes even major breakthroughs that people had missed. In a game like Pokemon, even the small adjustments are often enough to gain an edge over your opponent. Players identified that while Urshifu might be trading on overall firepower by going Stellar, taking out the turtle was so important that they justified the use of an otherwise weaker option. It's the players, and it's also the specific Pokemon that they had to deal with. And it's the collision of these two things that led to Stellar Starburst when we moved on to the next format.
Would you be interested in playing VGC side? Yes, I absolutely am. I am definitely interested. I have a few VTuber friends that are into VGC. I just have to finish my Scarlet file, which I will do ASAP. By ASAP, I mean within the next month or so, and we'll go straight into the world of VGC.
Regulation H. Regulation H was, in terms of the Pokemon available, a step backwards. It banned all Paradox and Legendary Pokemon from play, bringing the overall power level down by a huge amount. But as I've always said about Pokemon, a smaller Pokedex doesn't mean fewer usable Pokemon. In fact, it often means the opposite. With less literally earth-shaping attacks flying around, the lower power Pokemon can finally crawl out of hiding and enjoy a chance to actually play the game. In Regulation H, that meant old standbys from past regulations like Kingambit and Gholdengo returned. But it also meant Pokemon that had been newly released but crowded out, such as Archaludon and Ursaluna, could make a huge splash. And in this new format, very specific conditions allowed Terra Stellar to thrive, and with it, the players who identified its place as a solution to specific problems. We had a new applicant for our singles ad, one who fit all the same criteria that we'd been looking for before, Sneasler. When Sneasler first made its time machine trek over from Hisui, it found itself totally outclassed as a fighting type by, you guessed it, Urshifu. But Urshifu is a legendary, so with the bear banned, Sneasler was able to scavenge the remains of the format, quickly becoming one of the top threats, and eventually becoming the most used Pokemon in the game. Just like Urshifu, Fluttermane, and Chien-Pao, it's a fast, frail attacker who wants to use both types of its stab moves. It even has an additional reason to use the Focus Sash item. As if staying alive weren't appealing enough, Sneasler's Unburden ability also allows it to become the fastest thing on the field, bar none, once the Focus Sash has been used. But as we saw before, simply fitting the criteria isn't enough to make Stellar work. You need to find the perfect constellation of damage calculations and use cases to actually make it fit. And luckily for Sneasler, it had its eye on the right place in the sky. As I mentioned, one of the other kings of Regulation H was a Pokemon already familiar with the throne, Kingambit. Now, close combat from Sneasler obviously should obliterate Kingambit, but it only works if Kingambit hasn't already terrestrialized into a dark type. Once it becomes a pure dark type, Sneasler just misses out in the KO, unless it has some kind of additional boost, which of course is where Terra Stellar comes in. And in addition to knocking Kingambit off its lofty perch, it also helps out against opposing Archaludon and Incineroar. But of course, a calculation on one type of move isn't enough to justify Stellar on its own. If Close Combat was the only move that wanted to buff, why not just go for Terra Fighting and ensure everyone is pumping out huge damage? Now you could argue that keeping Poison as a defensive type is actually helpful for Sneasler, but I don't buy it because Sneasler is frail enough already, even without factoring in that it's always lowering its defenses with Close Combat. So keeping Poison around wouldn't be enough on its own to justify using Stellar over Fighting. No, the real reason for the newest type being used here was that it not only boosted Sneasler's fighting type moves, but its poison ones as well. Kingambit wasn't the only Pokemon that Sneasler was just barely missing out on one-hit KOing. It also came just shy against the starter duo of Rillaboom and Primarina. With Terra Stellar, one of the most toxic moves of all time could take them out in one hit. I'm talking about the move that some players believe single-handedly ruined this format, Dire Claw.
What is this? Has a 50% chance of either poisoning, paralyzing, or putting the target to sleep. Wait, that's so funny. It can do either or. Oh my god, that's so annoying. Everybody in chat is so mad. Why? Everybody hates this. Everybody hates this move. 100% accuracy. Amazing. I would be the person running this.
Dire Claw was already notorious due to its whopping 50% chance of inflicting a status condition, but by running Terra Stellar, Sneasler could use it to do huge damage to boot. Stellar Sneasler wasn't used because it was the best type in a vacuum for the Pokemon, but because of the shape of the specific Pokemon that we're seeing play and how much damage they just happen to take from Sneasler's moves. Even still, not every Sneasler ran Stellar. A lot opted for Dark to stay safe against Psychic type moves, and in turn to fire off boosted Throat Chops, the power of which Stellar couldn't hope to match. And Sneasler's stellar success served as the inspiration for several other Pokemon. Kingambit was so prevalent and so bulky that for a while there, Stellar almost looked like a second fighting type. At the most important event of Regulation H, 2 Focus Sash Stellar Annihilapes made it to the quarterfinals.
Oh!
These Annihilapes needed the boost for a slightly different reason, though to the same Kingambit annihilating end. These players didn't want to train their Annihilapes fully in its attack stat because they needed the points elsewhere. Since they ran Final Gambit, these Annihilapes wanted some HP investment to ensure that they could surgically remove slower Pokemon. But because they'd taken points out of the attack stat, Close Combat was not picking up the KO against Terra Dark Kingambit, something that Terra Stellar could fix. But with Terra Stellar, Close Combat would pick up a one-hit KO, and also allow Annihilape to consistently KO Goldango with Rage Fist after they'd taken one hit, all the while still allowing them to invest heavily in their HP stat for Final Gambit. Stellar was so effective on fighting types that we even saw a rare non-dual type Pokemon use it, Mienshao. While Mienshao doesn't have a secondary stab move to exploit, it does have the useful coverage move of Ice Spinner. Now, without the Stellar Terra, this move could miss out on a 2-hit KO on most Rillaboom in the format, but the one-time 20% boost just barely let it crest that threshold. Fighting types weren't the only beneficiaries though. The lower damage numbers of Regulation H meant that even Pokemon not traditionally thought of as attacking threats could take advantage of Stellar's damage boost. Pelipper was one such example. Now, I've personally never really been a fan of Pelipper, mostly because its stats are just terrible. But even I'll admit that it can put out huge damage with Stellar Terra thanks to 100% accuracy hurricanes and rain boosted weather balls. But arguably the most interesting Stellar type users were those who did it without a Focus Sash. Suddenly, we're editing that personal ad to be a bit more open-minded. After spending a few too many battles taking Stellar boosted Close Combats to the face, Archaludon decided that it had had enough. It was time to turn the star power back on its foes. Some Stellar Archaludon did this because they were using the Sturdy ability, which is effectively just the Focus Sash item in ability form. But some Archaludon weren't some Focus Sash character.
We watched the video on FNJTV on the 12 most annoying Pokemon, and Sturdy Pokemon literally had their own freaking slot in the video. Amazing.
Frail little weasel. Instead, they were Pokemon that thrived on survivability thanks to the combination of its good natural bulk, its stamina ability, and the Assault Vest. So why did it end up using Stellar Terra? Well, for one thing, Archaludon's already got a great natural typing. For another, it's liable to take over games with that typing on its own if it gets enough boosts. And I'm not just talking about the defense boosts that come from stamina. While it is true that our Caledon is incentivized to use both steel and dragon type moves, a lot of the time it's going to click a move that's a totally different type first, Electro Shot. Since Electro Shot only takes one turn in the rain and it boosts special attack before being launched, our Caledon frequently ended up with boost to spare after a few turns. And at that point, it wouldn't matter that the Stellar Terra had already worn off. The initial boost to Electro Shot, however small, does the job along with the one-time stab boost. Again, as with many of the Pokemon that I've mentioned, Stellar was never standard for our Caledon, but it was a niche option that showcased the typing being used in ways that we hadn't considered before. And our Caledon actually isn't the only dragon type Pokemon that made Stellar work. In fact, I used our Caledon alongside a very different dragon myself, and while I didn't Stellar Terra our Caledon, I did make use of it on Kingdra. And I used these two dragons to win the final tournament of Regulation H. See, I decided that I wanted to use Kingdra, but I had some specific threats that I wanted to get rid of, specifically Jumpluff, Ursaluna, and Annihilate. And if you look at these calcs, those actually don't quite get there, but that's because I didn't include something. The item that I was using that wasn't Focus Sash. See, I know from experience just how strong stacking multiple different multipliers can be. If I didn't have either Life Orb or Terra Stellar, Kingdra would definitely come up short here. I had a Swiss Army Seahorse equipped to take on every situation where I needed it to. Kingdra was especially cool because it also had access to the Weather Ball attack, which was supposed to be used as a water type move most of the time, but since Weather Ball's type changes depending on, well, the weather, it allowed me to get multiple different stellar type boosts than just water and dragon. And this situation actually came up in the finals where I was able to use a fire type Weather Ball earlier in the battle and then still have water type moves boosted later on to try and close it out. And this last example, the one that I used for myself, is a big part of the reason why I changed my tune on Stellar Terra. I can hear what you're saying. Wow,
he's just built different than everyone else.
And now you like it, huh? Well, to that I say, I've actually used it successfully a couple times, okay, first of all. And also, yeah, I'm not perfect. Game Freak, if you want me to test out any other mechanics and tell you if they're working, let me know. But in all seriousness, what I'm really saying is this. When I said that Terra Stellar wasn't all that successful a year ago, I said that it was a niche application only viable on a few Pokemon that was unlikely to see much play outside of these specific situations. And now, it's still a niche application, it's just viable on a few more Pokemon that only sees play in these specific situations. But to be fair to the Stellar type, I could apply that same description to just about 90% of all the things in Pokemon, from item choices to moves to specific natures to EV spreads that go down to some of the most ingenious innovations our game has ever seen. Just, I couldn't apply it to Incineroar. That Pokemon's a bit too popular. Terra Stellar may be niche, but I think that's actually a good thing. Trying to build a good team can sometimes feel like trying to draw blood from a stone. How do you extract the most value possible from the most situations while not limiting yourself in others? I've talked a lot about how Stellar succeeded because of specific situations and threats in a format that allowed it to thrive. It's a precarious balance, right? We're saying functionally that it took off because of some pretty specific situations. Like, think about Sneasler, a Pokemon that was formerly irrelevant but now became a top threat just because Pokemon instituted an arbitrary, limited time format that banned all of the legendaries, and it just so happened that it barely doesn't one-shot these other extremely relevant Pokemon that people were using that just so happened to be weak to both of its stab moves, and it was just short by the exact amount of a boost that Terra Stellar provides. Like, what? That is so specific. This is a pretty rickety Rube Goldberg machine, and the last time I made one of those, I just ended up with a bunch of marbles and dominoes all over the floor. You could make the argument that Stellar Terra only became more widespread because of specific conditions that happened within the formats, and actually, I guess I have spent a lot of the video telling you just that. But while it's certainly true that specific conditions let the Stellar Terra take off, it's not the only reason why. Personally, I give a lot of the credit to the team builders. And to be fair, I give it as well to Game Freak for designing such a well-balanced mechanic. I particularly appreciate this because we've been hit with lots of unbalanced mechanics and Pokemon over the years. Things so strong that their power is readily apparent. Not so much with Stellar. Its more reasonable offerings meant that team builders really had to find the perfect situations to use it. And that takes time. When Stellar Terra first released, it was a brand new concept that players had never seen before. So it makes some sense that we didn't figure out the best way to use it right away. But with time,
it takes a little bit. I think also Pokemon TCG can kind of see that too, where there's certain Pokemon that took a little bit of time for it to get it to shine because it just was not like looked into very much, and or like the cards that would go well with it weren't there. I think one of the most recent examples I can think of is Joltik. So at the time of recording, Joltik Box is currently a really strong contender for one of the like best decks in format, just because it's so fast and aggressive. And the current state of that deck, it's really good. Joltik came out maybe a few months ago. I don't even remember. Joltik was, it's been out for some time. So basically what it does is for 1 energy, it looks for a combination of lightning and grass energy from the deck, and you attach it to 1 Pokemon. And you play it with Iron Hands, which is a very good Pokemon, because if you kill a Pokemon with one of its attacks, it'll take an extra prize card. And both of these Pokemon have been out for a while. It just took a little bit of figuring out that, oh wait, this combination works, for people to start playing it.
Trainers innovate, optimize, and push the game beyond its limits. With time, we come to see the potential from those who showed it before us. And with time, I've changed my opinion on Terra Stellar. These days, it is still rare once again, but who can say where the end of Scarlet and Violet will take us? Above all, I'm personally happy that Game Freak introduced a mechanic that seemed to be very weak when it first released, because it took some actual work to figure out just how it could be strong. Thanks for watching.
Yeah.
If you like this video and you haven't already, you should check out the original Terra Stellar video. I think it could be really interesting to see kind of the differences as this year has passed.
Hey man, it happens. That was a fun video. I don't have too much to say because it's more so like me like taking in information, but it sounds very interesting. VGC, honestly, it sounds a little more scary to me than TCG, because like you kind of know what to expect from like certain decks, but when there's so many different Pokemon, I'm sure there are like the meta builds, right? But you never know. Somebody might put Stellar on a Kingdra and you're like, holy shit, what the fuck? That was fun. I enjoyed.